which we will guide you through, but and to speak for 3 minutes, and that is a fairly tight window. There will be no conversation. It will be purely your statement that you're given the opportunity to read. So I'd like to first come to Donna Hill, please, if you come up. Thank you, Donna. On the right of the microphone, you'll see a button. When the red light is on, please start. Thank you.
20 years ago, the same developers first proposed 3 detached houses on the back of this site. That scheme was refused, calling it intrusive, alien, and seriously damaging to the character of the area. And yet here we are again, 2 decades and nearly 30 different application amendments or appeals later. We're back again with the plans for 3 detached houses. The irony is the original plans were arguably better than this cramped version. Throughout the developer's statement, there is a repeated emphasis on delivering without delay, yet 20 years have passed and nothing has been built. A lot, however, has been destroyed. Now we are faced with a proposal for a 3rd detached house. It has been slotted in as if by magic, apparently with no impact on neighbours or the local ecology. But this is simply not true. On the planning portal, the original drawings had absolutely no measurements whatsoever. Now we are privy to these. It seems that the boundary is reducing from nearly 10 metres to just 2.4 metres. Apparently, in the developer's eyes, this makes little difference. In reality, this is a reduction of more than 7 metres. My new outlook would be nothing more than a brick wall, an unacceptable and oppressive change, which I strongly object to. Those 7 metres are very important in my eyes. The plans are omitted the large protected oak tree. This omission raises real concerns about its long-term survival. Past experiences gives me no reassurance. Previously, we were promised that the trees on the site would remain. Instead, they were ripped out in a single day. With them went the bats, the birds, the hedgehogs, and the biodiversity that once thrived there. We are now told that the off-site biodiversity will make up for this loss. Off-site, where off-site? Off-site does nothing for our community, and those trees are no longer there in those previous pictures. Parking pressures will inevitably increase no matter what is claimed. To suggest otherwise is simply unrealistic. As the nearest allowable parking spot, any visitors or extra cars will be parked outside our bungalows for sure. And highways concerned apparently no longer exist. In 2012, the council's own highway and transportation officer stated, concentrating and intensifying access to this location adjacent to the pedestrian crossing is undesirable and a detriment to road safety. How this is changed is a mystery because the pedestrian crossing is still in the same place. If you'll feel me, you must approve something here to help meet housing quotas, then why must it be detached houses? Terraced houses would provide more garden, would sit more comfortably with the plot and would be better reflection for the semi-detached properties already approved on the main road. The reason the developers have not suggested this, of course, is profit. Detached houses bring higher returns. Hopefully, your concern is not about the developer's profit. 20 years ago, this was judged as overdevelopment. Nothing has changed. We can only hope you consider the long-term impact of your decision. The vote against this addition, please, it is within your power to consider our living environment and not filling the wallet of the developer.
Thank you, Donna. Well timed. Could I now have Esther Weller, please?
2017, Councillor Heslop at an Area 1 planning meeting said, let's give them that planning permission as long as they get on with it now. That was 8 years ago, but this planning history really started in 2006. After 2 refused developments by the inspector from Bristol, the developer changed his plans to 1 property on the rear plot, which was accepted by the council. About 2 years and 350 days later, a hole was dug as proof that the building had started. The developer then changed the plan to a semi-detached pair instead of 1 house. Then he wanted to take the semis apart and build 2 detached houses. Later again, he decided to take the two houses further apart from each other and add carports, and then to move the dwellings closer to the northern boundary. All those changes and approvals, but there was never a real start. Now we are talking about 3 detached houses. I can only assume that all this change results in more money. The rear gardens of White Cottage Road are very shallow, not very deep, and my house is only 8 to 11 meters from the proposed properties. So the new dwellings are overbearing and have an overdeveloped layout, with noise and light pollution a real problem. I've been approached by Prolem's John Sutton several times, requesting, among other things, to take the foul water pipe through my garden and into White Cottage Road, with a suggestion to make it worth my while. I didn't like this, but regardless, Southern Water would not have given their permission. Recently, he gave me the assurance that they can put in an acoustic fence along the northern boundary to diminish the noise from the new dwellings and their cars. This then brings me to the position of my house. On one side will be cars from the road parking alongside our bungalows, and on the other side a new proposed car park just meters from my bedroom windows. So I'm wedged in between 2 lots of car parks. I'm really hoping that the new owners will never have deliveries or removal vans, as there is no space to accommodate them, nor to turn around or to pass each other. I've also been told by John Sutton that because of drainage, the rear units have to be elevated, which means that they are now much smaller and lower. I have no idea what he was talking about, as unfortunately, without any measurements on land levels, there is no indication of how low or high these units will stand. As for ecology and biodiversity, compensation off-site is of no use to this neighborhood. The biodiversity was almost completely destroyed by the developers, but in order to try and invite the wildlife back into our gardens, we ask for bat boxes, swift boxes, and hedgehog tunnels to be introduced. We ask for this along with the acoustic fence and the light pollution protection from this council, who as our area caretakers to maintain and improve environmental qualities are in the right place to do so, because policy NE3 of the MDE DPD states that development that would adversely affect the biodiversity will only be permitted if appropriate mitigation and/or compensation measures are provided within the site. It is within your gift. Thank you.
Thank you, Esther. We can now have Simon Mackay, the agent. Thank you.
Evening, Chairman and members. Firstly, a quick apology for the email that went out earlier this morning. I think something that's been ringing in my ears all day is measure twice, cut once. But hopefully that's something that we've been able to resolve. And obviously, no doubt some of you may have some questions for the officers. I think the main driver for change, yes, I do share frustration with the development not having happened yet. I live half a mile from the site, quite local. I do pass it almost every day. We have a developer on board who is keen, ready to start, to the extent where building control and technical design has been almost complete on both the extent scheme and this scheme. So it would be nice as a local resident myself to see the site come forward. The main driver for change really was, having spoken to a couple of local estate agents, they felt that 2 larger executive style homes at the back of this area of Tunbridge wasn't particularly desirable, and actually some slightly smaller family homes, given its proximity to a number of local schools, was a better option. We've looked at the updated comments and conditions from the officer today. We also have no objection to any of those. I think something that's important to pick up is the overall density of the development. I did look at Tunbridge and Morning had a capacity study, I think, carried out in 2023. In this area of Tunbridge, I think was low to medium density, and given its good sustainability credentials, the recommended density was 35 dwellings per hectare. This site with this scheme represents a density of 30 dwellings per hectare. The extant scheme is 26 dwellings per hectare, so hopefully you'll see that the density is quite comparable. A question was brought up regarding biodiversity credits. We had a company called Arbtech who completed our B&G assessment. They have a side company called Wild Capital. The intention, I think the question was asked of officers to me this morning, what the intention would be, and the intention is to purchase off-site an off-site credit. I believe it's 0.49 of a scrub unit that we need. Another question was raised regarding parking and turning. I think it's important to point out that the extent scheme, as you come through to the rear of the site, the amount of the square meterage and the size of the circulation space is almost identical to the current scheme. So whilst we have 3 dwellings now instead of 2, there's no encroachment onto the previously allowed circulation area, as you can see there, just at the back there of the units. Another question was raised regarding bin storage. I think the intention would be to have curbside collection, which is standard along that part of Shepton Road, and the part of the pavement that's there is particularly deep. So again, we didn't envisage there would be any conflict with other pedestrians. Another question was raised regarding drainage. Land levels are less important now because we've decided to have a pumped system.
Thank you. Time is up.
Thank you.
Thank you. Right, I'm now going to the point where we come to members, but before I do that, I want to make you aware that the recommendation is a paragraph 8 of the report on page 33. The recommendation is to grant permission subject to the signing of a legal agreement to secure off-site biodiversity net gain credits, and in accordance with the detailed conditions, reasons and informatives set out in the report, subject to the views of members. So I'm going to come first to local members. So over to you, Councillor Mehmet.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I think thank you also to Donna and Esther for their very good speeches and for coming all this way to basically share their concerns over this proposal with us tonight. And I certainly have a great deal of sympathy with everything they've said. And I would urge all other members of the committee to kind of take that on board as well. This is a very frustrating site because, as has been said, it's basically been sat there for years and years. I actually remember, I think, probably about 3 or 4 years ago, maybe, when these bungalows were demolished, and the developer has basically put the hoarding up and without much sort of care or respect for the community, basically just left the site to rot. And Keith and I have been very fed up over the years with the amount of graffiti that's just been left on the hoarding. Developer hasn't really paid much attention to cleaning that off. Until we've had to ask quite a few times, and the site's become very overgrown, and residents have got used to that, as you would, until recently when it was all basically scraped and cleared in anticipation of this application coming in. I appreciate obviously not all of those things are planning considerations, but I think it is important to understand that context of this site just kind of being left there without much thought for the residents around it. Onto the application, and I obviously recognise that there is a previous scheme for one less unit, but I think you have to think with these things, there comes a point when you can't just keep adding more and more houses onto it. You know, when is that point when one house is one house too many? And my strong feeling is that we have reached that point now. I think the access arrangements were very dubious even on the previous scheme, and adding another house with more parking, more manoeuvring, delivery vans, lorries, HGVs, I really can't think how anyone's actually going to be able to move into these houses because you're certainly not going to get a delivery van in there. So to my mind, as a design point, it's not going to function well. And I think that is in conflict with quite a lot of design policies. In the conversations we've had with officers earlier this week, I raised quite a lot of concerns about the poor quality of the plans that we'd seen. There isn't, for example, any plans that show these 3 houses in context. All we've got is individual plans of each houses, so it makes it very difficult to basically properly assess the impact. There is no elevation plan that shows the houses in the context of the neighbours' houses. So again, it makes it very difficult to see just what the impact would be on those houses. And you start to think, is that omission of information deliberate to try and downplay that effect, which is very concerning, I think, to Keith and I. So we were promised section drawings, I think, by the agent's email earlier. I haven't seen any. I don't think our residents have seen any. And I appreciate there's been some changes to the wording of these conditions and that they're supposed to be provided before development starts. But obviously at that point, it's too late. And I do strongly feel that the levels on the site that slopes down, where we want to add another unit and we want to be even closer to neighbours' gardens and houses, is very important to provide up front before we make that decision, so this committee can understand what the impact is on neighbouring residents and how the levels through the site would look. It's also a concern for me because the existing tree preservation oak that we can now see on this plan that wasn't on the original site plan. So again, this is the first time I've seen this plan tonight. I think it's probably the first time residents have seen it as well. Makes it very difficult to see what the impact would be on that tree. I appreciate we've had some comments from Ed, our tree officer, about this, and he seemed to be satisfied with it, although I did note there's a very significant level of root protection area incursion on it. And 335C is basically right under the canopy of that tree. And my concern is that would put a lot of pressure on it. You'll get leaf litter and branches falling on it, and sooner or later they're going to complain and say, well, we want to chop it all down, or seriously chop it back to the boundary. So I think it is going to cause long-term degradation of that tree preservation of the tree, compared to the previous scheme of 2 units, which wouldn't have done that. And then reading these conditions earlier, I think what just really confused me was, what is it, 12A, just the wording on here. So just try and get my head around this. What we're saying is that another tree protection plan and arboricultural method statement shall be based on and expand on the principles contained in the previous one. And this is the key bit, but be amended to omit any potentially contradictory information and provide full details of the precautions and methodologies undertaken, so on and so forth, to prevent damage to the adjacent TPO tree. So I just, in 11 years of being a planner, I have never seen a condition like this that says something should omit any potentially contradictory information. So I have to kind of ask, well, what contradictory information is in that report? It doesn't sound like we're confident in this. And so I think, to my mind, in the absence of the section drawings that we've asked for that really should have been provided from the outset, the absence of, proper tree information that isn't contradictory, this doesn't seem to me to be like an application that we should be making a decision on tonight. And I strongly feel, at the very least, we should be deferring this, coming back in a few weeks or a month or whatever, where all this information is available and residents have had the chance to look at it and consider it, and perhaps at that time we make a decision. So I'll leave it there, Chairman, but perhaps I could come back later on, depending on how discussions go. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'm going to come to Councillor Tunstall.
We won't be surprised to hear that I actually agree with Adam. But there is one other thing that I will do raise, and it was mentioned in one of the speeches, about the road safety. And the more housing will obviously, I think we'd all agree, mean more cars, which means there'll be more traffic going in and out of this site. Now, this site, the exit to this site is 10 yards from Pelican Crossing, a very, very busy Pelican Crossing. There are 2 schools, Hugh Christie and Page Green. Plus, obviously, you come the other way, there's access to the doctors. So this is a very, very busy Pelican Crossing. Your cars exiting could quite easily obscure other vehicles coming from the north to South Tunbridge, especially during the school time when lots of children are trying to cross. And I think that also, as Adam mentioned, the access road will not be large, will not be wide, and there'll be vehicle and turning circles will be pretty tight. And I can see that there'll be vehicles reversing back into Shibham Road because they can't turn around. And I think that's pretty dangerous. And I think from a safety point of view, I really don't think that adding another house on there and more cars is very good. Now, I know KCC didn't comment and think it was an issue, but that doesn't stop me from thinking it is an issue. Thank you.
Thank you. I can't see any other hands at the moment. Right. Councillor App.
Thank you. Yeah, it's the usual planning issue, isn't it? So I'm guessing that the extant planning that's already been approved is not up for grabs. Nothing we can do about that. Nothing we can do about the fact it's close to the crossing. Nothing we can do about the fact that we've now got houses going bang smack in the middle of a place that's generally bungalows. That's already done. Can't do anything about that. Hurrah. But it does feel to me like we can say enough's enough, and we can try to give some small measure of protection to the people that live in the bungalows in that area. Yeah, I mean, to me, I can't quite how we approved the last one, but that's not, I wasn't here, so there we are. So given that we've got no say over that, and we might have some say over this, I feel like Adam, actually. I don't feel like I've got enough information. I don't like the fact that it's been rushed. I don't like the fact that loads of trees have been ripped out already. I feel like I'm being hoodwinked a little bit. So I'm largely supportive of that thought that we should defer this and get proper information and make a proper.
Thank you. Councillor Rhodes.
Thank you. Councillor Mehmet asked for this to come to Area 1, having regard to hillside principles. So I wonder if we could get the officer to explain that to us in detail, please. Chairman, precedent is never set with planning, but similarities do exist. And in Hildenborough, a while back, in Tunbridge, when I knew part of the Hildenborough ward, in Tunbridge and Farm Lane, there was an application practically the same as this, except there was more houses in the back. And the one thing that was commented at the time was the two houses either side of the new access road, their security is now compromised. Whereas before there was no pathway, they now are susceptible to whatever on a security matter. A moot point maybe, I don't know. But there's no detail on that picture there that says 6 foot high fence for security. That's one thing I'd like to just mention. Now, we operate, Chairman, a curbside collection where your bin should be on your land, not the pavement, for collection of waste. And we have here a situation where we've got 3 houses in the back where the residents will have to, and look what they've got to go through to get there, electric gates. Now, it does seem a little bit peculiar to, and I'm sure the people in Tunbridge Farm Lane don't pull their bins. They have the waste vehicle go down there. Now, why are we not asking for a turnaround down in the rear section there for the bin lorry to turn round? Which we would have done, I'm sure, in the past, Chairman, on a planning application like that. So that's all I'm going to say, Chairman, but I would appreciate the hillside principles being explained. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll come to Councillor Cope and then we'll come back to the officers.
Thank you, Chair. I was actually going to talk about bins or ask about bins as well, because it's the same idea. It just doesn't make any sense to me. I may have misunderstood what has been said, but I just can't make any sense. That if I'm to understand, we take the back 3 houses, are they to drag their bins and then store them on the pavement, which is already a mixed use cycle path and pedestrian use where next to 2 schools? So you would potentially have 3 wheelie bins plus the food bins plus the cardboard and paper storage. I know it sounds very granular detail, but I'm just imagining this in the space that's there. I just can't picture how this is acceptable or works. That just seems absolutely ridiculous to me. And if I've misunderstood what you're saying, that this will go onto the pavement, then please correct me. But otherwise, I don't know how anyone thinks that that's a good idea.
Thank you. Philip?
Thank you, Chair. So there was a few points raised by several different councillors. And I appreciate this slide was added, which wasn't at our pre-meet, but the applicant did provide a cross-sectional drawing just to give some context. But as you may have well know, you wouldn't have seen that until this evening. But it's there for you, and I'll leave that on the screen for you. In terms of the hillside principle, the original principle was known as the Pilkington principle, which Hillside confirmed in 2022. But in effect, the principle is where 2 or more planning permissions have been granted on the same area of land and the development has been carried out under one of those permissions, if that development has made it physically impossible to carry out the other development approved by another consent, then it may no longer be relied upon. The more recent Hillside case confirmed that Pilkington was correct. The court fully endorsed that approach, and then added that it shouldn't be taken too far. Court made it clear that the benefits of a planning permission would not be lost if there are minor rather than material departures from it, particularly relevant when considering changes to large multi-unit developments. So in effect, there was concerns that this new permission couldn't be built out without those impacting the previous extant consent, and therefore it was considered needed to assess it in full with the benefit of the 4 dwellings at the front of the site as well, so that the totality of the development could be assessed. So that was what was resolved with the addition, the changes through the course of the application. Hopefully that's somewhat clear, but yeah, in effect it meant we had to reconsult and get new red lines submitted so that we can assess it.
Yeah, just to add on that, it came about at validation stage. So when the application first came in, the red line went just around the 3 dwellings at the back and down the access road. And Councillor Mehmet rightly said, this is an incorrect way of presenting the application because the fee was for 3 houses and the red line only included the 3. The hillside principle, as explained by Philip, because the front 4 hadn't been built out. It was a validation problem, which he originally Councillor Mehmet called it in at that stage. We then went back to the agent and said, in accordance with this principle, you need to put a red line around the whole site, even though you've got permission for the 4 and they're not changing. It's a comprehensive site that we're assessing. So once the red line included all 7 dwellings, the fee represented the 7 dwellings, so the hillside principle was no longer a problem. So it's probably confusing now to worry about it as a call-in reason today. If I'm sure Councillor Mehmet will agree that it's all been resolved, but it really was a validation stage problem that we resolved.
Thank you. I've got a couple of points that I wanted to add, but I didn't think we actually addressed the proximity to the crossing. How much of an issue that will be? We'll come back to the access does worry me a lot because it's single. I have a similar property just further along Shibham Road, past Whistler Road, and it's a single property giving single access down to one single property at the back. And I've been in and out there, and it is potentially where you've got a conflict about do you reverse out into the street. The difference with this particular property is there is ample turning space on the rear property. With regard to the bins, I mean, my house, I put 2 brown bins out, I put a paper container and I put a food bin. So each house potentially could put 4 units out, which is times 3, which is 12 plus the 4 at the front, which is another 6. No, sorry, another 12. So it's going to be a busy old pavement, this. But I take the point that Councillor Atwell made that basically we are dealing with extant permissions, and so we are going from this point here. I am not happy, but I understand it's acceptable that the BNG can be outsourced and traded off against the addition of an extra property, which I assume that's where the profit is. But apparently that's within the rules. And the other thing is I personally can't get a perception of the degree of dominance or not of the property because I can't actually get a picture in my head of the ridge height of the new buildings and how they will dominate the street scene, the adjacent properties and the properties back in Thorpe Road. I'm having some difficulty with that. So I don't know if you picked up any points from that, but there is the one about the closeness to the crossing. Thank you. And I think we had Councillor Hood, but I'll come back to you after this, and Councillor Clokey. Back to you.
Thank you, Chair. So yes, it does in part come back to the extant permission site. If I just move over to the plan here for you. So yes, it's already been previously accepted and it was considered by officers and as well as with a discussions with highways that they didn't consider, as officers don't, that one additional dwelling would have a severe or significant impact on the arrangement. It's said it's perhaps not we would like to see today, but the fact is there's that extant permission in place, and it's not considered an additional dwelling, would make that significant worse than it's currently.
Councillor Hood.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I too am frustrated by many aspects of this, including the access. I cannot imagine how the previous consent was granted with an access so close to that pedestrian crossing, but the die seems to have been cast in those previous decisions, which is bonkers in my opinion. Yeah, you've mentioned the turning circle, Chairman. What really worries me is actually cars coming up from those three properties at the back, and a car coming, if you've got a car coming the other way, because they're going to have to, the car coming in from Shipman Road is going to have to reverse out onto the road, onto the zigzag lines of the pedestrian crossing. I think that Councillor Mehmet, his comments earlier, this really is kind of, at what point have you the straw broken the camel's back? I think the additional house is pushing it too far. As well, I think the report talks about the application site is within the built-up area with higher densities are able to be accommodated, but you can see the difference between the previous application consent and then the size of the gardens there, and then the size of the gardens here. That is quite a considerable difference, I think, between the amenity space that's available. I think that it would be preferable to have those ridge heights, to have proper illustrations so that we've got something to go to. I can see what's going on with the trying to strengthen the conditions around the tree, but I also agree that there seems to be a bit of wriggle room there, and this committee is well aware that if the problems you get with a planning consent, that takes precedent over TPOs and things like that. So I'm not quite sure how watertight that is with the current wording. Although I can see what the officers have tried to do.
Councillor Clerkey.
Thank you. 3 questions, hopefully quite small things for officers. A couple of points raised by members of the public who were speaking earlier. There was a concern about light from the development. What analysis have we done on that? And if there's potentially a problem, could we mitigate it appropriately with a condition? Second question, there was a question around hedgehog tunnels. I think there was hedgehog tunnels, hedgehog highways. I can't remember the term. Again, is that something that's possible and can be conditioned? And a third thing, just if my maths is right, talking about, I don't think we really covered it in the answers. If there are 4 refuse receptacles per house, and there are 7, that makes 28 bins or other bin-like things on this site plan. Where can someone, for the easily confused like me, point out where the 28 bins are supposed to be left on bin day? Thanks.
James?
So on the site plan here, on the collection days, there's been I've got the laser pointer there. It's shown that they're to be housed either side of the access points here, ready for the curbside collection. So that's third point first. In terms of hedgehog tunnels, as part of the ecological enhancements included as part of the site, as if it's perhaps deemed necessary to make it acceptable in planning terms, then that can be added in if members wanted. There will be as part of the landscaping condition to come in, there will be some enhancements in terms of additional planting, etc. as well, but that perhaps something that could be conditioned. And in terms of the light from the development, there was a comparison between the existing permission and the proximity to the boundary, which was slightly further away. I think it was 4.1, I think, instead of, yeah, so I think we got 4.1 from the northern boundary, now it's 2.4. So there was a comparison between the two, and it was, yeah, I suppose, an officer assessment as to whether that would cause additional significant harms over and above the extant permission or not. It was considered it wouldn't do. The side elevations, as you may see, because the properties have been narrowed, there's less on the flank there in the proximity, or the neighbouring property here. They've been sort of set further in the site. So overall, it wasn't considered there would be significant harms in that. I appreciate the resident in terms of the outlook. Again, outlook in of itself isn't necessarily a material planning consideration, but I appreciate the impacts of the development on the residents. But again, because we had that extant mission in place, the comparison between the two was undertaken just to make that assessment and to see whether the harms of the additional unit would outweigh the benefits and cause those detrimental harms, especially given the land supply position and the extant permission in place. So hopefully that helps on those. But
Thank you. Councillor Cope.
Thank you. Just listening to that, what I'm not getting a good picture of is at what point would we say, actually, no, that is too many. So, you know, balancing up here, whether it outweighs that, like, at what point are we going to say, actually, no, that is too much? Because to me, 2 looks like it's pushing it. And obviously we can do nothing about the existing permissions. But I really do feel that making a comparison between these two the previously approved layout and what we're seeing before us, it does make me wonder at what stage we start actually saying, I think this is just a money grab to squeeze in as much as we possibly can, to the detriment not only of the people living around it, but very possibly the people who will be living in these properties. What is the cutoff point where we say it's too much? Just out of interest, like, is there a stage where we say, actually, no, that is too much? Thank you.
Councillor Atson.
So something occurred to me as we were talking. Obviously, we're talking about this plot having been left dormant for years and years and years and years. At what point did we do the bionet diversity assessment that we're trying to mitigate to? Because I heard one of the ladies that spoke this evening talk about the fact that loads of trees have already been ripped up, and we've lost bats. And so, when did we do an assessment to work out what the biodiversity net level is, and therefore what gain we're trying to mitigate here? It just kind of interested me, because I'm thinking, we done it 20 years ago, or did we do it 2017, or did we do it last month, or at what point did we do that? And is there any evidence that there has already been a big degradation in terms of biodiversity on the site?
Philip, you got 2 questions there. You got them both? First question was from Councillor Cope, was when it becomes over development.
So I suppose it's a matter of fact and degree. It's we take into account the material considerations of the planning application, the site, the density of the area, the character of the area, distance from neighbouring properties, and in part, the application is before you this evening at committee for members to consider. If that is the case, for the call-in request was partly for that reason. So officers didn't consider it was overdevelopment of the site based upon that sort of multidisciplined assessment, but it is committee's discretion to consider that and make their own assessment on that. In terms of B&G, thank you. In terms of that, as part of the 2022 application, the biodiversity net gain legislation wasn't in place. There wasn't a requirement for a biodiversity net gain effect. It would always be perhaps best practice for there to be enhancements on any site. So the assessment was undertaken as part of this application. So it was submitted with the application. So it would have been done this year or perhaps the end of last year, but it was done as part of this application. So fairly recent.
Just on the biodiversity net gain, yes, Philip's correct that the previous application didn't benefit from the requirement to carry out the studies and the matrix, which we now have to do for every application such as this. But it is a point to remember that with the previous scheme, I know you're not keen on comparing them, but if that one is implemented, there is no requirement for them to provide BNG on-site, off-site, anywhere. If this one, you know, I'm sure in your mind there's quite a few disbenefits, but one of the benefits is that whether it's on-site or off-site, it's still a net gain, which is what the government wants to see for developments these days. So if it's approved, the Section 106 will secure a unit preferably within the borough first, and if not, then within the wider area of Kent. So it wasn't needed before, it is now, and therefore, whilst they may have cleared the site, which they can do if there's no trees or species as such that they know about, we can mitigate that to some degree with this application, whereas we can't with the previous one. It's just a point to remember.
Councillor Cope.
Thank you. I just wanted to follow up this sense that overdevelopment, you're saying it's to a degree. You're not saying there is a set point where it becomes overdevelopment. It's for us to determine whether we think that. So legally speaking, can I ask, do we feel that if we suggested turning this down on the grounds of overdevelopment, that, because you're not telling me where the degree stands, it's very difficult for me to say, like, would I be able to propose this is overdevelopment? So I would just like some advice on that, because if it's not an empirical number that you're giving me that this is overdevelopment, but this side of the line is not, I would just like to know a little bit more on where we stand legally for that. Thank you.
I'm going to go to Councillor Cope, Councillor Rhodes first, and then I'm going to James online to answer that point.
Chairman, thank you. I've not had an answer about bin lorry entering and turning round. And the reason I've not had an answer is because there's no room, because you'd have to cut some garden from the houses in the front, and that extra house in the back makes it even smaller as well. I've got a feeling this isn't over intensive. Unfortunately, we're not going to get a chance to turn it down there. We can't turn it down because of the bin lorry, but I'm not happy that we can't get the refuse collected from these people's houses in the normal manner, which was with the bin lorry going in, turning around and coming out again.
Hi, yeah, there's been a lot of concern about the bins. So because the houses at the back, they would have to, the bin operatives would have to go more than 25 metres to collect the bins. It's normal in those situations where residents, and I myself do it, you take your bin on bin day to the curbside. And yes, on bin day, for a few hours that day, there are a lot of bins out there, which are then removed at the end of the day. The 4 houses at the front would be within that 25 metres, so there's no reason why they can't stay within their, or at the edge of their property off the highway. And the bin operatives, as I'm sure they do in all of your roads, will stop the bin lorry as near as they can, and then they'll take them from front gardens or those that aren't front gardens that are on the road. So personally, I can't see there'd be a situation where you would have all 4 bins for all 7 houses at one time. And just a comment, I don't know if it's different in Tunbridge. I live in a different borough, a different ward in the borough, but we don't have the bins, all bins on the same day. That's just a question, I don't know. But it is also common practice for there to be backland development where bin lorries cannot always go to the front door, the front garden of each property. So as long as there is a understanding with the people who buy the properties and the occupiers that they need to take it to the curbside. So that, I think, answers the question about why the bin lorry can't go in there. It clearly can't, and highways have always been happy with the fact that there is no manoeuvring for a lorry of that size. And as I say, it's normal to take the bins to the road frontage. I understand you're worried about clutter, lots of bins all together, but I think this is normal curbside collection, and it's something that if that is a real worry, that maybe the plan, if we're deferring for other reasons or delegating for the conditions to be changed, I don't see any reason why the 4 properties at the front, can't leave their bins within their boundary because it is so close to the bin operatives to collect. I feel that sheds some light on my view.
Thank you. James Bailey online to address Councillor Cope's point, please.
Hello, good evening, members. I'm just going to raise the point. I mean, obviously, overdevelopment is a subjective matter, but as I said, the officers have previously referred to matters that you would consider in terms of character of the site, in terms of density of surrounding areas. But I just wanted to make members, draw members' attention to NPPF paragraph 124, which is kind of a key decision factor in your assessment, where it says in terms of paragraph 124, planning policies and decisions should promote an effective use of land in meeting the need for homes and other uses while safeguarding, improving the environment and ensuring safe and healthy living conditions. And then 125 in paragraph C says you should give substantial weight to the value of using suitable brownfield land within settlements for homes and other identified needs, proposals for which should be approved unless substantial harm, and that's the bar, would be caused, and support appropriate opportunities to remediate despoiled, degraded, derelict, contaminated or unsuitable land. So that's the bar that members have to meet in terms of if you're going to apply if it's overdevelopment of the site. And I think officers and the agent has given a sort of an assessment in terms of what is the density of this site and the density of the surrounding area. So I think that's the weight, the policy weight that you must apply. And I would again reaffirm where it says in 125C that you must give substantial weight to the value of using suitable brownfield land, which this does comprise of. So in effect, what members are considering is one additional unit. I appreciate in terms of concerns have been raised in terms of the access and weather and proximity to neighbouring properties, but you've got a report in front of you that sets out in terms of the officer view, which considers impact in terms of both amenity, impact in terms of highways, in terms of the use. So you're considering one additional unit on the site. I hope that gives some sort of insight in terms of how members, I can't give an exact definition what is overdevelopment because it's a subjective matter. But what you have to do when reaching that conclusion, as I said, is take account of all those other matters in terms of neighbouring density, surrounding character, the fact that we haven't got a 5-year supply, we've got a 2.89 year supply, and the fact that you're in paragraph 11 territory on this particular application as well, because we haven't got our 5-year supply, which again promotes a very high bar. So to my mind, with paragraph 125 and paragraph 11, they are high bar hurdles to pass. So I hope that gives some members some additional information on overdevelopment.
Thank you. I'm going to come to Councillor Clokey and then Councillor Mehmet and then Councillor Parry. Yes.
Thank you. I was just going to clarify on the question of 4 rubbish receptacles. It's not everyone for a house. That's assuming 1 green lid bin plus 1 green box plus 1 food caddy plus 1 garden waste bin is 4 receptacles, and that's certainly what I put out every fortnight.
Councillor Mehmet.
Thank you, Dennis. I think obviously James has helpfully quoted some NPPF paragraphs for him, but here's one that has been on my mind listening to the debate tonight. Planning decisions should ensure that developments will function well and add to the overall quality of the area. So that's paragraph 135. The other thing that I think we really need very, very clear advice on was this concept of the site being previously developed land. Now, to my mind, that's wrong. And I'll put some points across to you, but we need to be really clear on this point. So previously developed land excludes land in built up areas such as residential gardens, and it also excludes land that was previously developed where the remains of the permanent structure or fixed structure have been blended into the landscape, or, in this case, removed. So on that basis, to my mind, it's not previously developed land, and that sort of policy test about not causing substantial, unless they cause substantial harm, doesn't actually apply. So I think certainly we need proper, clear advice on that. I think, as far as I'm concerned, it's pretty clear that it isn't previously developed land, because it's garden land in a built-up area, and that's excluded from that definition of previously developed land. Secondly, I've been waiting all night for an answer to my question about condition 12A, where it was saying that it should be amended to admit any potentially contradictory information. So it's not clear to me what contradictory information, given that it's there must be some contradictory information. So what that is, and whether we can really make a decision on this tonight. A couple of other procedural points. So, this site plan we haven't actually seen until tonight. It's not on the file. The tree was missing. There was no refuse collection point on the pavement in the original submitted site plan, so that's been added on later. It's been added on too late, really, in my view, for us to properly think about the implications of it. And again, residents have come here and done their speeches without the benefit of that site plan. The cross-section plan, definitely, again, I haven't seen it before. Was it even in the presentation? Possibly I missed it when it was being presented, but I hadn't seen that before tonight. So again, I think it's somewhat unfair on residents that they've raised these concerns because they haven't had the right information, and this has cropped up on the day that it's being held at committee. This should have been provided. If the applicant was trying to make his case that this wasn't going to harm neighbouring amenity, we should have had cross sections, north to south and east to west, showing the land levels, showing the position of neighbouring houses and gardens, and then we could properly looked at it. So it's all very disappointing, and I'm not blaming officers. They've obviously done the best with it, but we really should have had this information from the outset. And from what we have seen, it's kind of been haphazardly put together at the last minute. I just don't really think it's kind of fair on this committee or on residents to try and absorb this information whilst we're here trying to make a decision on it. So I would like to know about the previously developed land point. I would like to know about the contradictory tree information. I do have some concerns, I think sufficient, that I probably would be minded to put forward some refusal reasons, but perhaps we could have these points first, Chairman, and come back to it later. Thank you.
I'll come back to you, Philip, on those points before I go on. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So just on the first point, in terms of previously developed land or not, that hadn't formed part of the assessment for the report, and the reason for that is the local plan policy CP11 directs development to the sort of confined and urban areas which the site falls within, and therefore the principle of the development was accepted under CP11, so there wasn't an assessment under pre-developed land or paragraph 11. In terms of 12A, just so members are aware, there was reference within the arboricultural method statement with regarding to hand digging within the site, and some general points around how they were to protect the tree. Specifically, it's a reference to hand digging and sort of those contradictory points with the actual method of construction, which has been confirmed and agreed between the tree officer and the applicant. So they're the why that was included. So specific for developers or the applicants to know that that's what we're looking be removed from that arboricultural method statement. Any reference to hand digging, that clears it up.
So yes, the contradictory information, it came to light following the email this morning, which did refer to changes in land levels and has since been agreed. The agent, in discussions with yourselves this evening and with us today, has confirmed that there won't be any. However, and the tree officer has tightened up, as you can see, some conditions, how he wants the construction to go in terms of protecting the tree, root protection area and everything. But as part of the original ARB method statement, there was a plan within it, the tree protection plan, which refers to hand digging, which isn't going to happen, and it isn't part of the proposal or the part of the conditions. So that's partly why it's requested that if you are minded to approve, that it's delegated to the Director of Planning, Housing and Environmental Health, so that we can get the plan amended so that we can list it in conditions and condition 2, because at the moment we don't want to put that plan in there because it is confusing and contradictory to the agreed methods. But we do want the correct plans in there for the decision notice and for obviously build out. So to allay any confusion, that's why we've requested the approval be delegated, if that's so minded. And the conditions for, I think 4, 12 and 19 have all been firmed up to prevent any confusion that there's been only from this email this morning that I think's caused confusion on levels. So yeah, in summary, there's a couple of plans that show different dig methods to has been agreed as will be approved, and condition 12 seeks to resolve that way of amending the plans, amending condition 2 and delegating authority to the director.
Thank you. Councillor Parry.
Thank you. Can I just start by saying my issue is going to be again about the bins, which I hate to go on about again, but can I just start by saying I thought the objections that were raised at the beginning, I think you both made some comment about the power being in our hands, and I can't tell you how my heart sinks in meetings like these when people say that. And I hope you have an idea now of how very restricted we are in this. And it breaks my heart when people come and raise what I think are incredibly reasonable objections, and there is so little that we are in reality able to do. That said, with regard to the bins, I don't want to let this go, because on the every other fortnight, when there are potentially 4 per household with the brown bins and the green bin and the cardboard bucket and the food waste bin, am I right in thinking that one of these curbside positions there is right where the crossing is? And I do think that puts a totally different position on it from a safety point of view. When you think as well that these bins, it's not just a few hours. Most people put their bins out the night before. When it's dark, that's quite early in the evening, so they get them out while it's still light, especially if they're having to bring them some length. And if these people are working, they won't be taking them in till the following evening. So that's over 24 hours. In the meantime, however responsibly and neatly the owners of those homes have put them on the curbside, that's not necessarily, from my experience, where they will be stacked or put back by the bin men who are under great time constraints themselves and will fling them back onto the pavement any which way. And I do have significant concerns about that right next to a pedestrian crossing, and I think there has to be something that we ought to be able to do to try and control or contain that. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Hood.
Oh, comedy microphone time, brilliant. Been waiting all night for that. Yeah, I think Councillor, the questions that have been raised about the condition about the arboricultural report, I've read the bits of the that were available on the website, and about the hand digging. I think that alone would be enough to have a deferral of a deferment to bring this back to get that properly cleared up, because I'm not happy with that. When you look at that plan, we talk about the root protection area for the tree. What about the canopy? The canopy is overhanging the entire bit, that southwestern corner of the building itself. So you are allowed to remove, I think, any part of a tree that's within 2 meters of your property. That tree's got a TPO in it. So I think that the danger that is posed by bringing in a third building to the east here, it puts that tree at a much greater risk. Not only if we're using mechanical digging, if that is a possibility that there will be mechanical digging, I'd be horrified. But it's the danger that it poses to the canopy that really concerns me. What's the point of having a TPO if it counts for nothing when it comes to planning? I I cannot see how that additional property can be acceptable in terms of the density, the overdevelopment of it, and the impact on that tree. I think I really think that we need a deferral.
Councillor Clokey.
Apologies for coming back on the bins again, but just asking the question: if we're putting the bins out on the pavement, how wide is the pavement there? And once you've subtracted the space that the bins take up and a little bit of room for them being put back, not necessarily entirely neatly, are we confident that there's enough space left on the pavement for people to appropriately walk or wheel past? I mean, it looks like there's probably adequate room. I mean, is that a cycle path with a traffic light in the middle of the cycle path? Yes. So I think we should assume that all cyclists, well, we have to move everything over slightly because yes, I don't think we can assume cyclists are actually sticking to the cycle path there. I mean, are you phasing through the obstacles as you go? Yeah, so are we confident that there's still enough room for that to be an effective piece of space for people to use, even when there's bins slightly scattered about?
Councillor Atwell.
I just wanted to add to that. We've talked about proximity to Hugh Christie School and Cage Green. Obviously, there's the Oak Specialist College also within the grounds of Cage Green. So you do have a large number of young adults with various physical and mental issues going down to that school, and who come out of that school often to take part in things in the community. So, you know, while we're thinking about that pavement, can we just bear in mind as well that there's a high number of adults with special needs also using that crossing on a regular basis?
Right, Councillor Pilgrim.
Thank you, Chair. Just while we're on the subject of bins, just something picking up with obviously the traffic, pedestrians, cycle path, traffic lights, lamppost. We're now asking for the refuse guys to stop either side of that crossing, blocking access, blocking the crossing, the visibility of people wanting to cross for may only be 5 minutes, but you're going to put a huge strain on people that are either waiting to cross, coming over. To me, it's dangerous. It's an accident waiting to happen. It's zigzag lines for a reason. You don't stop on zigzag lines. Thank you.
Thank you. I just remind you that we are starting from a position of extent permissions, and that the structures at the front, the two large semi-detached, are part of the extent permissions. So the circumstances on how they will operate is part of where we are. The question is what the impact of an additional property at the back will have in terms of the scale of the problem, if there is one. You guys got anything you want to say?
Just to clear up any confusion, the access being close to zigzag lines and the crossing. So as you're aware, there's been applications on here since, well, at least 2009. But in 2017, Highways Authority agreed that as the access of the position had been revised, relocation of the access, which has been established under previous applications and the revised proposals, subject to imposition of conditions, no objection. So whilst I can see your concerns looking at the photos, looking at plans today, the position of the access, where it comes out in relation to crossing the zigzags, that has been agreed by Highways, and it was relocated, yes, at some point prior to 2017 to overcome initial concerns with earlier ones. So I don't think that in itself can be a reason for you to consider refusing it, because it's more than just, we've got one from 2022 for 6 dwellings that's been approved. But I just wanted to make you aware that back in the history of it, it was relocated to a position that is said at the time they were happy.
Councillor Hoskins.
Thank you. I think I'm the only one who hasn't spoken yet. I was just going to say, it strikes me as even more frustrating than planning often is that we're bound by decisions made by committees nearly 10 years ago. Traffic conditions haven't got any easier. None of us were, even I wasn't here at that time. And we might well have said something very different. I know there's nothing we can do about it, but I just have to vent my steam at the frustration of that situation.
Thank you. Councillor Mehmet.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm still not happy with this previously developed land point because we had an instruction from the Chief Planner that this was previously developed land, which triggers a much higher threshold for refusing planning permission. So in the NPPF, it says you have to approve housing on previously developed land unless substantial harm would be caused. So this is actually quite critical to a decision we might want to make. Now, I said very clearly why I didn't think it qualified as previously developed land, and I'm not talking about the principle of development. Yes, it's in the settlement boundary, but this point on previously developed land is quite important. So I would like a clear view from officers on does it or does it not constitute previously developed land. My view, as I said, is that it doesn't. I think my concern as well is because this plan with the bin storage area on the pavement has just cropped up tonight, highways probably haven't actually seen that. So, are we actually certain that they're happy for these extra bins, and again, beyond the previous consent to be cluttering the road like that? And there are going to be pinch points and you've got cars manoeuvring in and out of that. And if people are leaving the bins out all day and then they're going off to work, they're going to be sat there. There's going to be school kids coming past. There's going to be bikes. There's going to be cars coming in and out of the development, delivery vans. So to me, these are all symptoms of overdevelopment of the site, and I would probably, Chairman, like to put forward my reasons for refusal if you feel it would be an appropriate time, and then we see what the rest of the committee makes of it. So,
could you repeat that last bit and what your intention is?
I'd like to put forward some reasons for refusal, Chairman.
James, before I come back to Councillor Mehmet, would you like to comment?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, Councillor Mehmet's referred to the definition, and obviously the NPPF gives the definition of previously developed land, page 77 of the NPPF, and it gives a very clear definition, which says land which has been lawfully developed and is or was occupied by a permanent structure and any fixed surface infrastructure associated with it, including the curtilage of development land. And then it goes on to say previously developed land excludes land that is or was last occupied by agricultural or forestry buildings, land that has been developed for minerals extraction or waste disposal, where provision for restoration has been made through development management procedures, land in built-up areas such as residential gardens. So I think this is where the clear element, land in built-up areas such as residential gardens, parks, recreation grounds and allotments, and land that was previously developed, but where the remains of the permanent structures or fixed surface structure have been blended into the landscape. But it's certainly not the latter. It hasn't blended into the landscape, and obviously that takes a considerable period of time. I suppose the issue comes in is land in built-up areas such as residential gardens in terms of parks, recreation grounds or allotments. Well, my understanding is this was previously 2 bungalows that were demolished. So parts of it are garden, parts of it are certainly previously developed in terms of the built structure. So I think there is an element in terms of parts of the site certainly being previously developed, but then obviously there are parts of the land which are gardens. So in terms of where you get to a clear definition, you're not going to get a particularly clear element because it encompasses 2 areas where it is previously developed, and it also includes the garden areas of those previous dwellings, the bungalows that were on the site. But I can see in terms of where the member concern is. I mean, I'll go back in terms of where Councillor Mehmet's raised in terms of the bin storage. That provision would still be there with 6 units. So members have got to make the decision, does that addition of that 1 additional dwelling with the bin stores on the front, because exactly the same criteria would apply with the other 6 dwellings that there's a lawful consent for, an implementable consent. So members would have to consider, does the one additional unit on the bin store on that road create that additional hazard that members are saying that they feel that creates? And that relates to all the other issues together with the access and whether you consider it overdevelopment of the site. Is it that one additional unit that pulls that scheme into an area where it's considered to be overdevelopment of the site? I mean, that's for members to make that decision on. In terms of the inconsistency in the plans, I think the officers have alluded to where the inconsistencies exist. I will accept it's not great to have amendments at the last minute and not have proposals that have been submitted through the application and they've come at last minute. So I would accept that in terms of members. Members have got options tonight, whether Councillor Mehmet decides to propose recommendations for refusal or whether members decide to defer it for further considerations and further plans that have gone through a consultation exercise. That's really up for members to decide tonight.
Thank you, James. I'm going to come back to Councillor Hoskins and then come back to Councillor Mehmet.
Thank you. I just wanted to suggest that the one extra house actually does make a difference to the bins, because if the one extra house wasn't there, the bin lorries would be able to use the service road and go down and get them at the bottom end and turn round and come back out again. So the one extra house does make quite a big difference to that situation.
Thank you. Councillor Mehmet, I'll come back to you because I think you were making an offer.
Thank you, Chairman. I think, I have very carefully listened to the debate and what officers have said, but I think my view is that it is one step too far. So my suggestion would be that we refuse this application for the following reasons. So reason number one would be as a result of the additional unit at the back of the site, the proposal would be cramped and overdeveloped, including with insufficient space for the turning and manoeuvring of delivery vehicles and cars, an absence of on-site bin collection area, leading to bins cluttering the pavement, to the extent that the development would not function well or add to the overall quality of the area, nor would it represent high quality design and would be detrimental to the built environment and materially worse than the extant consent, in conflict with paragraphs 131 and 135 of the MPPF and policies CP24 of the Tunbridge Moorling Core Strategy and SQ1 of the Managing Development and the Environment Development Plan document. So that's reason number one. I can email it to you after if you like. The second reason would be as a result of the height, scale and depth and reduced separation to the boundary from the extra unit, the proposal would result in harmful overbearing and overshadowing effects to adjacent properties on White Cottage Road, in conflict with policy CP24 of the Tunbridge and Moorling Core Strategy and SQ1 of the Managing Development and Environment Development Plan document. Thank you.
And you're comfortable to provide that information to Sally? Got most of that, Sally? Yeah, thank you.
Can we make sure the tree is included? The effect on the canopy of the tree? I haven't got the wording, but
well, it's Councillor Mehmet's reason. So you have to.
It's harder for me to think of these on the fly. I don't know. Do you want to put some wording together and maybe officers could assist you as a third reason?
Councillor, if you could just remind me, so the tree, your concerns and in which are you wanting to include that into one of Councillor Mehmet's reasons for refusal suggested, or as a separate one? I want to know what is the harm.
Chair, could I just comment on that?
The additional dwelling causes a detrimental impact on the canopy of the tree, the oak tree that still has a preservation order on it.
Chair, would I be able to comment on that potentially.
please, James.
Can I just say that obviously the team leader, Holly, and myself and the landscape officer spent a considerable time this afternoon going through the plans, the proposals and the impact, and the tree officer, subject to the amended conditions on the supplementary sheet, did not raise objections, taking into account the previous consents, and the extant consent did not raise any objection to the application in terms of impact on the tree, subject to those conditions that were listed in the supplementary sheet. So just advising members that there wouldn't be support in terms of in terms of impact on tree from the landscape officer. So if members were to put that forward, there wouldn't be support from your officer on that basis in terms of impact on tree, given the fact that we would also have to consider putting forward suggested conditions, which any inspector, if they're looking at that, would look at those suggested conditions. So I'm not saying members can't do it. I'm just advising members that there wouldn't be a professional support on impact on tree on that basis if you went down that line.
Councillor Hood, before I go back to Councillor Mehmet.
Thank you very much, Chairman. By the same token that you wouldn't have the overshadowing, you wouldn't have the effect on the adjoining properties if you didn't have the additional dwelling. The same thing would apply to the tree if you didn't have the additional. So the only reason we're talking about the tree is because there's an additional dwelling. If you didn't have that there, then the tree doesn't come into play.
Councillor Mehmet, it's your proposition.
I think if we're going to go for the tree one, I would probably say that based on the contradictory information provided, you know, it has not been demonstrated that there would not be harm to the canopy and root protection area of that tree as a result of the extra unit. Because I'm still not fully understanding the hand digging, not hand digging aspect of it. Now, I think that would be a carefully worded decision that we would say on the basis of the information we have in front of us, because as we know, there is contradictions in it. It's then over to the applicant. They could possibly provide that information at appeal, and we may decide we want to withdraw that decision later. I'm a little bit more on the fence on that one, but I can tell it is a concern to councillors. So perhaps we take them in turn and vote on them individually. But that would be my suggestion, is to tie into the fact that we have contradictory information on the tree details, and we're just not satisfied at the moment based on that information that tree wouldn't be harmed by that extra unit.
Okay, so we had 3 points from you as subsets of your recommendation. Do you have a seconder for that proposition? I've got Councillor Tunstall. So what I'm proposing is that we go to a vote on that proposal. Are you happy that, depend upon, is everyone happy that we proceed to a vote, and then if there is a need to, we will detail the proposal and agree between the secretary and the councillor? Is that okay?
Apologies. Are we doing each reason in turn or taken as a block? I'd maybe suggest we do them in turn, but.
That depends on how you make your proposition. I am happy to do either.
I think we'll do them on block, Chair, if that's all right.
Okay. James.
Yeah, could I just check, because Councillor Mehmet's second ground of refusal is relating to the amenity of neighbouring properties as well. Can I just ask, presiding officer, that they're sort of satisfied, because obviously that goes contrary to in terms of what the officer is saying, but could I just be satisfied that the presiding officer is content that that is a defendable ground?
Sorry, I think still. I'm not convinced myself, given the bulk that's previously been approved. I this is a difference of opinion. And in terms of, well, I think James, what you're saying is it defendable at appeal? given the material consideration of the previously approved. So the reason for refusal talks about harmful overbearing and overshadowing. That hasn't been a concern of officers when we were writing it. We've looked at everything. We've looked at the distances. I don't believe that would be, personally, I don't believe overbearing or overshadowing would be defendable, but it's a judgment. We've written the report and we've considered it, and our view is that it isn't either of those, and there's no harm to residential amenity to a level that could be justified. But it's a reasonably written condition, reason for refusal.
Okay, I think that's sufficient on that basis. Thank you very much, Holly, and thank you, Chair, for allowing me to come in on that basis. I think it should be proceeding to where Councillor Memmott wishes to take the vote. Thank you.
Sally, I'd like to go to a vote by member, please.
So, members are now voting on the proposal proposed by Councillor Memmott and seconded by Councillor Tunstall to refuse the application based on the 3 refusal reasons set out by Councillor Memmott, and just to confirm that Councillor Hood declared that he's not voting on this application. So when I call your name, please can you indicate whether you are for, against, or abstaining this motion to refuse? Councillor Afua?
For.
Councillor Barton?
For.
Councillor Clokey?
For.
Councillor Cole?
For.
Councillor Hoskins?
For.
Councillor King?
For.
Councillor Memmott?
For.
Councillor Oliver?
For.
Councillor Perry?
For.
Councillor Pilgrim?
For.
Councillor Rhodes?
For.
Councillor Tunstall?
For.
I can confirm we have 12 members voting in favour.
Thank you. So that proposal is duly carried. I'd like to move on, please, now to item 7. And item 7 relates to planning appeals, public inquiries and hearings. I'm offering you the details provided in the documents to note the outcome of planning appeal decisions for Area 1 since the last meeting of Area 1 Planning Committee. I'd like to know if anyone has any questions from the material provided. I've got one hand so far.
Thank you very much, Chair.
Okay.
I'd like to just comment on 111 Douglas Road, which this committee refused planning permission. When it went to appeal, the inspector decided to ignore the new Kent parking standards, which gave us a much better grounds for refusal. And I just want to put it on record that it's very difficult sometimes to see any value in what we do in this room when you have planning inspectors who completely disregard the wishes of the committee and very recently agreed planning regulations which are meant to strengthen the planning committee. It's just hugely disappointing.
Any other comments from the floor? I have none. Thank you. We have no urgent items, Sally, is that correct? I would now like to close the meeting at 9:10. So thank you for your attendance and your contribution.